Hey guys, my name is Matimio, and today I want to talk about the idea of there being no skill in Star Wars Battlefronts. It seems like the cool thing to do right now on YouTube is to hate on this game, and one of the reasons why, or a lot of things that I hear, is that the weapons require no skill. There's a very low skill ceiling, and so there's no real difference between a new player or a veteran because there's no skill gap. And so I just thought this would be fun to talk about. I love delving into weapon balance and how that has an impact on the gameplay, and I figured I'd make a video about it. And so first off, you need to know going into this that I'm going to be making a lot of comparisons to Battlefield 4. They're both made by DICE, so that makes sense, but also when you talk to most gamers that have been involved in the Battlefield franchise, they would argue that yeah, weapons do require at least some skill in this game, and so I thought that that would be a fine parallel to draw. And so one of the biggest critiques that I've heard is that weapons in Star Wars Battlefront have a lot of bullet spread and bullet deviation. Bullet deviation, for people that aren't really accustomed to that term, basically means that if you hold down the trigger while you're firing your weapon, even though you might be pointing at an object, the bullets will start to deviate further and further away from where you're aiming at, and that is bullet spread. And so the criticism that people have for this kind of system is that even though you're aiming directly at the enemy's body, because the spread factor is in place, it's a flip of the coin if you're able to take him out because your bullets are going to be zipping around everywhere, or your blaster shots aren't going to be landing right where you're pointing at. The thing is, though, is that while this is a valid critique, when you compare the bullet spread numbers from Star Wars Battlefront to Battlefield 4, they're basically identical. I mean, there are some differences, but when you compare it to the assault rifles, which have some of the best bullet spread in Battlefield 4, there's really no difference here. Where things get interesting, though, and this is probably the best argument for people that are claiming that there is a low skill ceiling in Star Wars Battlefront, is that there is very little recoil on these weapons. There's really no getting around it. There is almost no recoil in this game, but it doesn't mean that it's non-existent. Here, for example, I'm using the RT-97C blaster, and when I just fire at this turret on the distance, you'll notice that it does drift up and to the left. It's very similar to what we have for a lot of weapons in Battlefield. Like, here's a prime example. These recoil patterns still exist in Star Wars. They're still there, and while they're not as noticeable because many people are running around in third person, you're not actually seeing the recoil of the weapon because you are in that third person mode. There is recoil that you're having to compensate. I think the best way to describe it is that a lot of the blasters in Star Wars Battlefront have a very similar recoil to the slower RPM weapons in Battlefield 4. If you take a look at the SAR-21 and compare its recoil to the A280C blaster, they're practically identical. And while I do realize that I am cherry picking here, I realize I just picked one of the most accurate weapons in Battlefield 4 for the assault class, where do we start to draw the line of what is skillful and what is not skillful? Many people would argue that the weapons in Battlefield require skill, and the SAR-21 is a part of that category, so why wouldn't the A280C require skill because of this same recoil pattern and this same functionality? And so I think what it comes down to is that because all of the weapons require less recoil than most, I mean, it's still there. As I mentioned, there are still some weapons like the RT-90C, like there is recoil here that you're having to compensate for, but just in general, because there is less in the game, that is a valid criticism for why there is less of a skill gap. A really good example of this is the AEK in Battlefield 4. When you first start to use this weapon, it's unruly. It's got a lot of recoil to it. It's going to feel unmanageable, but eventually when you put hours upon hours into the game, that recoil becomes more manageable. You understand how to compensate for it, and by the time you have 500, 1,000 kills, it's second nature and you're able to dominate with it. That is one definition of a skill gap in a first-person shooter. When you first start off, the weapon's unruly, you can't control it, but by the end, you've mastered it and you're able to dominate the enemy. Where things become more difficult with Star Wars, though, is when we start to take a look at their blaster travel speed. This is something that DICE did intentionally. They wanted to slow down how quickly your shots travel through the air so that you had that Star Wars experience. They wanted you to be able to see that light show, see your blaster shots, and if they traveled as quickly as your bullets did in something like Battlefield, you wouldn't get that same sense that they were going for. And so what this means gameplay-wise is that you now have to lead your targets a little bit more than the Battlefield franchise. It's not like you have to lead your target a mile ahead of where they are, but you do need to make those predictions if you want to be able to take them out. And so in my opinion, this is actually where Battlefront has more skill involved than Battlefield. And so while I will give it to you that there isn't any bullet drop that you have to compensate for, that is one difference between the game, which makes sense because these are lasers that you're using. If you have a better grasp of how to lead your target in Battlefronts, you're going to have a significantly easier time taking out your enemies compared to someone who is new to the game and hasn't grasped that concept or doesn't understand the travel speed of the weapon that they are using. And so from that standpoint, I would argue that Battlefront does take more skill when you have to take out a moving target compared to Battlefield. Those are really the biggest differences between the two games, travel speed and the recoil. When you take a look at all the other stats, I mean, unless I'm missing something major here, and I'm sure you guys will let me know, unless there's some stat that I'm missing that's going to have a huge impact on the gameplay, recoil and travel speed is the major differences between them, and both games have a different skill associated with it. And so this brings up the question, why do people think that Star Wars Battlefront doesn't have any skill while Battlefield does? I honestly think it's because of the recoil. I mean, recoil is a big thing in first-person shooters, and I do have to kind of critique DICE on this because, yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing that differentiates weapons for most first-person shooters. If there was a gun or multiple weapons in Star Wars that had a high recoil pattern but had some awesome strength associated with it, maybe you never had to let off of the trigger on one of the heavy blasters. Maybe it took a very, very long time to overheat and it did a lot of damage, but there was an insane amount of recoil that you had to compensate for. That's going to have a larger skill gap than some of the weapons that we have right now. There's some other examples of ways that they could balance it on in, and that would add some more diversity. And so I think that right there is the keystone to a lot of these critiques. That does not mean that there isn't any skill, though, in Star Wars Battlefront, and while it might be a little bit lower, you also have to remember that it's higher in other categories like that bullet travel speed. And so what I'm really hoping for is that in the upcoming DLC, especially the free one, if you guys aren't aware, with not only Battle of Jakku, which comes out on December 1st, but they've also announced that they're going to be bringing even more free content to everyone. You don't need to put any more money down on this game. I'm hoping that they bring in more free weapons that will diversify and add in more unique mechanics that has maybe more recoil. It's kind of hard to say. We already know that DICE is going for more of an arcadey playstyle, and so that might not be the case, but that is one thing that I would like to see. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. Give me your thoughts on this topic. If you're someone who thinks that there is a low skill ceiling in Star Wars Battlefront, let me know why. If you're on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, also let me know why. Don't leave just a yes or no answer. Kind of explain in detail why you think it's one way or the other, because I love having this type of discussion. I mean, this is the reason why I love making these types of videos, but go into detail and give me your reasons. But yep, until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.